I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Law Firm Owner Podcast, episode number 234. Welcome to the Law Firm Owner Podcast, powered by Velocity Work, for owners who want to grow a firm that gives them the life they want. Get crystal clear on where you're going, take planning seriously, and honor your plan like a pro. This is the work that creates velocity. All right, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode. I am here again with part 2 with Randa Prendergast. Thanks for being here again.
Yes, thank you so much for having me again.
So the last episode, we talked about billing, and there were 2 things that we both thought would be really great to talk about on this show that would be really useful for listeners. One was around billing, and then the other was around workflows and delegation. So you wanted to start with billing. You felt like that was really important. Like, get your cash flow stable and right so that it really allows you to pay attention to and invest in workflows and delegation, getting those processes really set into place. And the combination of those 2, it seems like from your perspective, just seems like, okay, then you'll be humming in a very different way. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. For those of you who are chiming into this episode or tuning into this episode and you haven't listened to the first one, I highly recommend going back to listen to that one first. Episode number 233. This is 234, and we're going to talk about the workflows and delegation. So you could learn more about Randa there on the first one, and then I'll ask you some questions at the end for wrap up for everybody. Okay, so where should we start when it comes to workflows and delegation?
Sure. So let's just talk about like case workflows. Like, what do you expect to happen on a case from start to finish? So typically when I speak to law firm owners, I get a lot of, well, I know what's going to happen, but it's all in my head. And that works, right, for a true solo because they're the ones doing the work. But if you're planning or you don't always want to be a true solo, you need to start working towards getting those processes out and into some type of system, or at least on paper. At least. I highly recommend a case management system of some sort just because it works for you, not against you. But if you don't have one, that's not the end all be all. You can still utilize some of these tips and things that you should be doing until you get one, or just so you have it out of your head. So when we're talking about case workflow, we're talking about after retention, after your client has paid you and signed their fee agreement, right? You got to make sure you have both of those things first. And then we identify usually all the things that you're doing on a case at the beginning. So like there's a difference between the information you're getting in the intake process and then the information that you need to actually start representing your client. So a lot of times, doesn't matter the practice area, we usually recommend that you do some type of case opening or matter opening. It could be simple things, setting up your e-folders. Maybe you want to meet with your client again. It's huge in family law or any type of law where you need a lot of, you're going to need discovery information. Just family law sticks out because there's always either initial disclosures or financial affidavits or discovery. And it's so hard to get that information from your client when it's served on you in that shorter period of time. So we'll talk about, hey, why don't you send out a welcome letter and a list for your client to start gathering these items so it's less stress for you. You always want to think about being proactive instead of reactive. So we essentially like to start, what do you do from as soon as someone signs up with you? We recommend a matter opening or case opening that has some of those lighter tasks, but still very important. In the first part 1, when we were talking, we talked about how billing your client is good customer service because you are telling them what's going on in their case more frequently. And that's what I call a natural touch point. So your natural touch points throughout the case is sending them their bill, right? Sending them timestamp copies of their pleadings, sending them a hearing notice, reminding them of hearings or depositions or deadlines. But in addition to that, I always recommend building in a client check-in. So this can be anywhere to happen every 30 to 45 days. The reason we want to talk about this and implement it is because it cuts down on interruptions from your clients asking you a bunch of questions of what's going on in your case. It gives you the opportunity to follow with any pending action items that they have, like discovery or witness list. Also gives them the opportunity to ask any questions that they have. And then it also, you have the opportunity to ask them if there's been any change in circumstances. This is super important for PI. This is super important for family law. A lot of practice areas, you want to make sure there's been no change in circumstances. Did they lose a job? Did they buy a car? Did they move? All of those things, so you can keep up on that information as the case is going forward, because that's going to change your strategy.
How often do you recommend check-ins?
Anywhere between 30 to 45 days. A lot of law firms are like, I want it every 30 days. Usually it's a team member, like a paralegal or legal admin, can do this check-in. It's also an opportunity if they have more legal questions, that person can schedule a time with the attorney instead of having to put the attorney on the call or the check-in. And the check-in can be a phone call, it can be an email, but this task in this workflow essentially gets reset throughout the entire life of the case. And then when we're talking about case workflow and that matter opening, is we want to tell throughout all of your processes or your case workflow, we want to tell your team who's going to do this task, when they're going to do this task, and how they're going to do the task. So for that client check-in task, that would be part of your case opening workflow. We'll say the paralegal is responsible for the task. It happens 30 days after hire. The language of how to do the task is ask these 4 questions, give them an update on their case or a deadline, and reset the task for another 30 days to check in again. By laying out how you want it done and how you want to communicate to the client and what questions they should be asking, that person knows exactly when they need to do it and how they should do that.
Okay. One question that comes to mind is, I know that tasks are set up many times, oftentimes, or maybe all the time, inside of the case management software. Do you also utilize something outside of the case management software when you said when, how, and I don't remember the third one?
When,
when,
who,
and how?
Yeah.
When, who, and how. Yeah. When, who, and how. Like the how, is that in a different software that is meant to hold their internal processes, or no, it's actually all built into one software when you're working with someone on this?
That's a great question. So there's a little bit of overlap. We try to put as much information that we can right into the task, so you don't have to leave their task at hand to go look at how to do something. I do think that should be additional written processes on certain things that your team members should be trained on when they get onboarded. For example, discovery is a really good example. There should be a process for discovery, like a whole written process, how you should label things that come in. What needs to be redacted? Are you keeping a log of discovery? What your client provides, what opposing provides, maybe, or, if you need to subpoena someone, there should be even a good old Google sheet or Excel spreadsheet can satisfy that discovery log. But there are so many other things that go into discovery and organizing discovery that I think that is a really good place to have this, in your task process discovery per our policy and procedure. You can even put a link to it straight to that procedure. But that is a good example where there's going to be a little bit of overlap.
Okay. Yeah.
So
is there ever anyone or a particular software that law firms use that they don't have to have an outside because of how robust and how awesome it is? I would imagine the answer is no, but I'm just seeing.
And not that I can recall. There's different ways to put it in the system, but it's not going to all live in that task that you pull up to do. So,
okay,
yeah.
and I have one more question. Are there certain softwares out there that law firm owners are sometimes tempted to buy or purchase for some reason that you would just recommend against? Like when it comes to implementing the kinds of things that you do, it just makes it too difficult. There's so many barriers that it takes longer, or they're stuck longer than they need to be. And so really they should look into something different. And I'm not trying to throw any softwares under the bus, but listen, if you're about to say a name, they need to get their stuff together. So
Well, I guess to go back to your previous question, when I'm talking about softwares, I'm looking specifically at legal case management softwares. There might be a software like a project management software that can do something like that. That kind of leads to the answer to the next question. I'm not a huge fan of utilizing project management software for case management just because then your tech stack becomes greater because it can only do project management. It can't do legal billing. It may or may not be able to do document storage. It may or may not be able to have a calendar where you keep deadlines, right? So, I mean, if you're using like time slips or PC Law, it's like time to upgrade. Just when you're shopping or looking at software, identify your biggest pain point and see which one solves that pain point the best. There's not going to be a perfect case management software. It just does not exist. So go into it with that mindset, know kind of what your budget is, what you're looking for, and know what your biggest pain points are. Also know your level, how comfortable you are with tech, because some are very robust and some are not. So are you looking for more of the out of box, ready to use type of software? So like Practice Panther would be a really good one. If you're kind of comfortable with tech and you can do some things and you're willing to take the time or at least work with someone like me to do it, like my case would be a good one, middle of the road for you. If you are really big on tech and you want it to automate, meaning like you don't have to push the buttons as much, I definitely would look into Lawmatics or Clio. Clio can do a lot, and then they have a lot of tech integrations that can help too. So,
what about Smokeball?
So
if you don't have any thoughts on them, it's fine. But I'm just curious if you do.
I don't have too many thoughts. The few thoughts I have is Smokeball claims to be online, but they have an offline option, meaning they will be installed on your computer. And so that update between there and the cloud is not always real time, number one. And number two, they don't play nice with Macs. So if anyone on your team has a Mac, it's not a good choice. If you are married to Macs, definitely not a good choice. If you are unsure or open to having Macs in the future, I know it's like a war out there with PC and Mac.
I know.
So,
Yeah.
like, I will be the person that will never use a Mac. But some people, if you're even open to it, I still wouldn't invest my time and money into a software that doesn't play nice with it right now.
Huh. If people aren't Mac people listening and they are PC and they have considered Smokeball or they are considering Smokeball, what's a perk about Smokeball that, if anything, comes to mind?
Yeah, so I haven't worked with it too much, but a big feature is that it captures time really well, which is really nice because there's a lot of lost time. So it basically will capture all the time on a case that you're doing, and then you can choose what to bill, not to bill, which is really nice because sometimes you forget to set your timer or whatever, but it will tell you that you touched this case for this amount of time. And so it'll identify potential time you can bill to your client.
Have you worked with Faster Law at all?
I haven't. We haven't done like any implementation or anything with them. No.
Okay. I have some clients that swear by Faster Law with Clio, but I feel like there have been changes with integrations and maybe some behind the scenes drama between Clio and Faster Law.
I think I saw the drama. Yeah.
Yeah. So it felt like it really helped people in a similar way that you're talking about Smokeball, really capture everything. So I was just curious if that's something you come across or had to work with.
Yeah, some people do utilize that, which is great. Just keep in mind, it is a separate cost in addition to your case management that you're paying for. So when you start to kind of stack different softwares together, and that's what I was talking about, project management, you stack and they don't really integrate. At Clio, you can stack, but a lot integrates with each other. So you're still kind of like in one system. And then my case, they used to have a closed API. They have now opened their API. And so you can build with API with them. But I think they're moving towards like having those third-party software integrations more. They have a couple right now, but just keep that in mind too as you're taking a look at softwares.
Okay. I took you down a rabbit hole with that. Okay. If we go back to workflows, you mentioned the who. Do you want to speak to a little bit, just generally speaking, when it comes to tasks on like case tasks? delegation and how, like, what are some of the things that you see? What might be something helpful you have to offer?
Sure. So, you need to delegate because there's just not enough hours in the day, right? And admin tasks should be delegated and not done by attorneys. There's a million podcasts on that. There's a million articles on that. But to help you identify the type of tasks that you need to delegate, writing out your processes helps you identify who can do that. So if it's checking in with the client once a month, like an admin can do that. Simple, some levels paralegals will do it depending on what type of questions they're asking and stuff like that. But when you start writing out your processes, you can identify who should be doing it. Like, oh, an admin can do that, or a VA can do this, or a paralegal really needs to do this because it's drafting. The attorney needs to do this because they have to review it. My goal when I'm writing out a case process is that the attorney only has no more than 5 tasks. And 5 is a lot to me. And when we get into like trial and trial prep, it's a little different, but my goal is to write a process or build a process with you in answering discovery. Like there should be 2 tasks in there for the attorney. Everything else could be delegated to someone else.
What are those 2 tasks? Or is it just depend?
No, it's reviewing the discovery responses before they get sent to opposing and reviewing and revising those. And then it's just dependent on how that people do their processes. Sometimes the attorney wants to talk to the client about them, especially if they're a request for admissions or something like that. So sometimes that task will be written in there. And then also so that one could be 1 to 2.
That's so interesting. So, okay, but 5 for the length of the case?
5 is the max for like a process. So what we do is we break down each process.
Okay.
A process. Because what we don't want to do is take like, oh, what do you do from start to finish on a case and put it all in one task list or workflow? Because it's not all going to be applicable to every single matter. We break them down. So here's a good rundown of the different task lists and workflow that we would do it's applicable to family law and probably civil lit, like a regular civil lit case. We'll do a matter opening. We'll do a complaint list or a petition list if you're a plaintiff or petitioner. We'll do a response to petition or an answer. We'll do a motions list, a response to motion, discovery issuing, discovery responding. If you do depositions, we typically recommend 3 to 4 depo lists, depending. Civil lit has a little bit more than family law, but we do one for preparing your client for a deposition, taking opposing's deposition, taking expert's deposition, because that is different, and then taking a third party or non-party deposition, like a witness or someone. We'll do a mediation list. We'll do a pre-trial list, a trial list. Sometimes they're called different things. Like it just depends on how your jurisdiction does deadlines, but they're essentially the same process. And then, I'll do small lists like case management hearings, like a list for that. Even though it's not complex, there's still things that you need to do every single time you go to a case management hearing every single month. Like you got to tell your client, if you want to order up to hear a motion, you have to have a task to make sure that you have that to review to do that, because there's a deadline to submit it to the court. You have to put the new case management hearing on the calendar when you get back from the one that you were just at. So the processes don't have to be long and complex. It's just something that you have to do and you don't want to forget to do. We don't want to forget the fine details.
Okay, so within each of those 5 at the most, but now I could see why you're saying 5 is a lot. But per process, that's not what you're trying to do for the attorney.
No.
So
yeah, I
really
would say I said 5 like when you start to get into like trial prep.
Yeah.
Or pre-trial.
Got it. Yep.
So
okay, that's great. And so with the delegation, like once you start breaking these processes down, it becomes really clear who you can hand or give responsibility for certain tasks to certain people in a way that works and that the expectation is clear.
If you don't have anyone to delegate to, like still do it, because the goal is eventually to delegate to someone. And so just looking at it like, I want to do these type of tasks, then that tells you who you need to hire to delegate to.
Absolutely. This just comes back to, it's so hard to do for ourselves though. And I can see the value in having a company like yours break this down or help them break it down. It's the same thing with, we teach Monday Map, Friday Wrap. You have to get everything out of your head and onto paper, or you have a list of to-dos somewhere. And usually they're not broken down small enough. So it feels like your weight to carry. But if you just break down the things you have written down, there's like several to-dos within each item that you have. Then you can divvy out the to-dos and it makes everything lighter and move faster. But it's really, I was going to say it's a skill, but it's just a muscle that you flex. Like everybody has got the ability to do this. It's just harder for some than others. You have to be practiced in it. And having a guide, I think, to do that work because their brain is so far into other kinds of work. So having someone like you guys to help people do this with their systems and processes specifically is super valuable.
Well, and then when we are doing that with our law firms, we also identify inefficiencies. So I'm like, why are you waiting to do X? Like, why not get that out of the way at the beginning? Like, discovery is the big thing. I'm like, why are you waiting until you're served with discovery to ask your client for discovery docs? Like, you know that they're going to need 3 years of tax returns. You know they're going to need bank statements. Like, tell them at the beginning of the case, start collecting this. It saves the client time and money when they do get served with discovery because the hope is they have most of the stuff already. Or, like other things too, like utilizing a scheduler like Calendly. Like we talk about that a lot, how to utilize it, how to save law firms time, which translates to saving money by just utilizing something like that, having good calendar control and what that can do for your case processes. And then having that, utilizing Calendly and their workflows too for automation. So you don't have to do that follow up with your client or those reminders.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to say on the topic of workflows and delegation here that might be useful or any hot tips, so to speak?
Yeah. So once you do this, it's just very helpful because anyone who joins your team, you're cutting out that communication on how you want something done. So it aids in training new team members because you can assign them a task. You've already put those details in there. And then also like just utilizing just what I call like one-off task in your system is just very helpful too, even though if it's not part of a workflow or a task list, and just getting into the groove of putting those fine details into those tasks, especially if you're delegating it to someone else. So you can start identifying very quickly where you are in a case. Not only does it help you just be more efficient, but it just helps you identify where you are in a case and where you've been on a case pretty quickly. Like we did this on this date. So that's very helpful too. If clients have questions and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Gosh, this is the stuff. It's like the unsexy stuff that makes your business awesome.
But it's not unsexy to me.
Well,
Melissa.
okay, but that's the beauty. I feel the same way about planning and strategic planning and habits and focus, all of that, where some people don't. I mean, that's like the muck of it. It sounds nice. Sounds nice to have. Everybody wants good habits. They want to have good focus. They want to be good planners. And on your side of the world, they want good systems and processes. But to get that done and to create those, that's the result of a bunch of work that most people, if they're being honest, they don't want to do, but they want the result. And so I think it's super smart to set yourself up with partners that can help you get the results that you want, and not in a way that doesn't foster your own self-development as an owner. Because I do think, I was just thinking about, for instance, John Grant. Do you know who John Grant is? I love him. He is a teacher at heart. The thing about him that I think is different, and it's not better or worse, it's just different, is that he likes to explain and help and walk people through so that they understand how to do this for themselves in the future. And so the work he does is on the call with them. Like, it sounds like you guys perform some work for your clients. You bill for the time that you're really working on their stuff, right? Is that true?
Well, we kind of do both. So when you do legal consulting with us, you will meet with us once a week. It's a 1-hour working meeting. So.
And do you ever work on their stuff outside of calls with them?
Yeah. Okay. So sometimes we'll put some things together or obviously do implementation into software and stuff.
Yeah. So that's different. And I do think that, so it sounds like you help the owners develop so that they really understand, principally speaking, why these things are important, how to think about these things, how to structure things. You get their input. And so that's one piece of it. And the other piece is execution. And not that they have nothing to do with execution, but you guys also really own a piece of that to help them get from point A to point B. And when you're talking about geeking out and you're like, you think it is fun. Like you think it's the sexy part of the business.
Yeah.
That's what makes the world go round. And that's thank goodness for that, because people have an opportunity to partner with others who like to geek out on the things that they feel inadequate to do. And there is a learning curve that needs to be had. And you can provide that for people in a way that also, I guess I brought up John Grant because I do think it's different. Like you guys have similar areas of expertise with how you think about things and how you break things down, and you deliver different results, but he likes teaching. He likes development. He will work with it on a call with you, but it really is still sort of the owner's development that has to be pushed forward. They have to execute on these things. Whereas your company appreciates deeply the truth that you have to educate the owner, and you're kind of willing to do some of the work also to speed it up. And so it's just different ways you guys both geek out, different strokes for different folks, right? But I'm so glad you do think it's the sexy part of the business, because that's like, I get it. Really invaluable.
Yeah. Well, and I always hear, they're like, like they want to do it, but they're like, oh, I'm just not good. And I was like, good, good thing I am. So let's go, So
Exactly. Yeah. That's so cool. Okay. How do people, they know where to go, but you could tell them mrsjunelegal.com, right?
Yep. Yes.
And then of course, LinkedIn and Facebook for the Attorney Whisperer.
Yes.
And then one last thing I'd love for you to say is how you work with people. Like what can they expect? Are there packages, or is it, let's just enter into sessions together and go from there? What do you have to say about that?
Sure. So we'll identify on a discovery call their biggest pain point. So if it's AR, we'll do billing. If it's missing deadlines, we'll do calendar. If it's case workflow or delegation, or, just keeping cases moving forward, we'll do task lists or case processes. It's an hourly meeting each week. The case processes is pretty consistent of meeting weekly. On average, it takes about 12 weeks for a practice area. That's not consecutive. Sometimes we skip and stuff like that, but that's our goal. We build out processes, like 3 or 4 of them, then we'll do training. So you can start using it right away. So you have something and you learn how to use it, and you can continue to use it as we complete the processes. So that's really fun and nice. A lot of times we do calendar together because we'll do Calendly and we'll build out event workflows at the same time. So that pushes that timeline a little bit slightly longer, but you have 2 improved areas in your law firm. Billing is a little bit more difficult because it's all dependent on how you're doing billing, if your billing's current, if your matters are set up correctly. So it's still that hourly meeting each week. But as far as timeline, that does vary because there's all different types, like law firms are in different spaces when it comes to that. So
that's great. Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, this was so fun.
It was great.
Thanks.
I really appreciate your time. I think there's some good nuggets in here for people. And so what a great way this is towards the end of the year when these will air and people can really start to think about some of this stuff and what they want to shift for next year. And so I really appreciate your time coming on.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Hey, you may not know this, but there's a free guide for a process I teach called Monday Map, Friday Wrap. If you go to velocitywork.com, it's all yours. It's about how to plan your time and honor your plans so that week over week, more work that moves the needle is getting done in less time. Go to velocitywork.com to get your free copy. Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Owner Podcast. If you're ready to get clearer on your vision, data, and mindset, then head over to velocitywork.com where you can plug in to quarterly strategic planning with accountability and coaching in between. This is the work that creates velocity.